This is Michael Coffey, pastor of First English Lutheran Church in Austin, Texas, and this is another Tiny Desk sermon, an impromptu reflection on the text for the coming Sunday. This coming Sunday is, in the Lutheran Church, celebrated as Reformation Sunday, and this is the 500th anniversary of the start of the Lutheran Reformation, when Martin Luther put his 95 Theses on the church door. He tweeted out 95 tweets to say this is what needs to be addressed and changed in the church. And in honor of that, we're going to listen to this. This is a Japanese handbell choir playing A Mighty Fortress is Our God, Martin Luther's great hymn based on Psalm 46. So, the text for Sunday is a gospel reading from John 8. It goes like this, and then I have a lot to say about it. Then Jesus said to the Jews who believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham, and we have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying, 'You will be made free'?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." Well, as a few things to address in the text. The use of the word slave is difficult to know how to translate that. It could be translated as servant or indebted servant, bonds servant, slave. In our context, we think of slavery of African Americans, the kind of chattel slavery in chains, the horrible thing that was. And this is not quite that. Really at all, but it does imply some kind of relationship that is not free. And that's why Jesus is contrasting slavery and freedom here. The second thing about this is that John 8 is actually an extremely troubling chapter in John's Gospel. Much of John's Gospel is difficult to interpret and know what to do with when it talks about the Jews. Historically, this has been used in terrible ways for Christians to justify persecution of Jews and saying terrible things about Jews. John 8 is a particularly difficult chapter. I'm not going to go into it all. If you read it, you'll see why it's difficult. And we have to be careful how we proclaim these texts today. What I would like to say about this text, though, is that Jesus makes clear that the good news is about being set free. The good news, the truth. And in this text, the truth is not just knowledge. It's not just, being an academic and studying information. The truth is the truth about God that Jesus brings. The truth that God is a God of love. That's the truth that sets us free. As we hear this text on Reformation Sunday, it really makes me think about the next 500 years of the church and what is the Reformation we're undergoing now. The original Reformation was Martin Luther focusing on a messed up system of sin and forgiveness and things you had to do to earn God's forgiveness. And Martin Luther understood that in Christ, God's grace is a gift, that we are justified by grace through faith. So the key issue in the Reformation was justification. How the individual is made right with God by God's grace through faith, not by works, not by what we do, not by earning it, but simply by trusting that this is who God is for us. That was a remarkable and a world-changing revelation or rediscovery that Martin Luther brought to the church. But I'd like to suggest that Martin Luther only went so far in proclaiming the gospel, that Lutherans have tended to focus on justification as the gospel. I want to say two things about that. One, if you read more about what Paul says in Romans and elsewhere about justification, it's clear that justification is part of the good news, but it is really a means to the end. And the end in Paul, especially in Romans, is reconciliation. That the gospel of justification leads to reconciliation, so that all peoples, all humanity, divided by sin, divided by race, class, gender, religion, is united in Christ by God's grace. Reconciliation is the goal. Reconciliation is what leads to peace in the world. And so really, in Paul, I think the heart of the good news is reconciliation. And Luther needed to deal with justification, but we need to go farther. And now we see the other part of the good news in John's gospel is liberation. People being set free. Set free from fear, anxiety, from political structures that enslave them. So how do we as the church live out reconciliation and liberation as the heart of the good news today? There's a lot of people needing a word of good news of liberation. Maybe you do too. Let's live that out as best we can. Peace to all.